Yes, I do not like this particular boss fight very much. But how could I say that? I've gone on record saying positive things about similar encounters like, these things. Why is it that I don't like the good old immortal Ironed Nipple Incarnate? Honestly, it's not exactly the easiest thing to explain, so I'm gonna give Devil Survivor 1 and my experience with the game a little background before really tearing in. So Devil Survivor is an SRPG, the video game equivalent of chess, but if chess was more like D&D. You strategize where you want your characters to go on a map to deal with enemies as efficiently as possible. Each SRPG series has its own thing to stand out from the rest of the pack, or at least that's what I assume because the Devil Survivors are the only SRPGs I've played. So go ahead, leave your comments on how I should have played Fire Emblem, Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, or fucking Ogre Battle for all I care before starting with Devil Survivor. I won't blame you for it, and I may even agree with you to an extent, but I'm still going to try and explain myself to the best of my ability. Anyways, Beldr, you fight him towards the end of the third day. He's the first big boss of the game and the one most people think of when you say first boss fight in Devil Survivor 1. He's left quite the impression on the SMT fanbase, and rightfully so. He's considered one of the noob filters, a boss so hard that it filters out all the casual scum. Once again, like these two. But unlike them, something about this dude just doesn't do it for me. Instead of making me feel like I just conquered some Herculean challenge, I really just felt like I was barely scraping by. And that kinda sucks. One of my favorite things about RPGs of any kind is the customizability afforded to the player. You choose how you distribute your character stats, what classes they become, and what they do in the end. My favorite RPGs are the ones that allow me to customize characters to how I see fit, and having to work around the scenarios I'm in with those customizations. The fight against Beldr doesn't really do this. So time for a quick lesson in Norse canon. So one day Beldr and his mother Frigg had dreams of Beldr dying, and seeing as dying is considered a bad thing, and dreams typically have deeper meanings to them, Frigg made every single thing on Earth vow to never hurt Beldr, except for one unassuming plant called mistletoe, also known as Devil's Fuge. Loki, taking note of this, decides to pull a prank on Beldr by having Beldr's brother chuck a spear crafted out of mistletoe at the guy. Prank gone right, and Beldr ends up getting killed. So using this backstory, Devil Survivor's Beldr is a boss with complete invincibility to all attacks in the game other than the Devil's Fuge. In battle, its icon does a physical-based move that the protagonist can only use in encounters with Beldr, and is the only way you're dealing any damage to him. And Devil's Fuge leaves me bitter. It's designated as a physical-based move, which peeves the hell out of me. One of my favorite things in RPGs is the customizability of it all, and I love going for magic builds. Why punch something, an action I'm more than capable of doing right now, to my computer screen, when I could either electrocute it, freeze it, or burn it? More interesting, right? So for Devil Survivor, I took the magic build, and I enjoyed it for the most part, all one bite. You know, Beldr, when I saw that the only way I was taking care of him was by using a singular physical move, I was not pleased about it. I had barely invested anything into my physical stat and felt like I had screwed myself over, which is what I had originally thought for 2 playthroughs of Devil Survivor. Yeah, after doing some research for this video, I figured out that the damage Devil's Fuge does is actually based on your level and not the physical stat. And that's good, a smart way to account for stat distribution of the player. However, should a move like this be designated as a physical move? If it doesn't draw from your strength stat, what's the point? You mean to tell me just because the move involves you hitting him physically, that it's entirely a physical move? Yeah, that makes sense, but it's also misleading. Like I've said, when I saw that the only way I was going to beat Beldr was through a physical move, a stat I had barely invested to, I was worried I hit a roadblock. But I should have been fine because the damage done by Devil's Fuge was actually based on the protagonist's level, not their strength stat. Guess I should have read the attack to go. So the issue here is the lack of communication. By being designated as a physical move and having a brief, non-informative description, ends up messing with how I approach Beldr in the long run. Or at least how I did, until knowing that, you know, it was based off of my level. I felt a lot less confident approaching him, thinking I was only doing minimal damage because of my horrible physical stat, when in reality it was based on my protagonist's level. Despite basing the power of Devil's Fuge on the player's level, and not strength being a good way to account for what the player chooses to invest their stats into, this otherwise smart design choice is ruined by a lack of good conveyance and communication. Even if the move stated that Devil's Fuge is based on level and kept the physical attack icon, I think that would have been better. Bad communication is not something to be overlooked. Moving on from that, I want to start addressing some counterpoints to what I've just discussed. After all, Devil Survivor isn't just a JRPG, it's not all about the combat. It's an SRPG with turn-based RPG elements mixed in, and time management, but that's not really important for this video. Anyways, because of that, combat isn't entirely the whole part of the encounters you face in Devil Survivor. You've also got to worry about map navigation too, which is something I haven't really touched upon with the Beldr encounter, and that's what the true challenge of the Beldr fight is to some, or in other words, the combat sections are a small fraction of the Beldr fight. The challenge is actually navigating to Beldr himself. See, the actual turn-based encounters in Devil Survivor at most last up to 2 turns, a minute at most. A greater amount of time in the skirmishes are spent navigating the maps, getting to where you need to go, and all of this applies to every encounter in the game, not just Beldr. But unlike the rest of these encounters, the one against Beldr really seems to accentuate this. See, with there only being a single move you need to use against Beldr, the turn-based encounters with him take even less time than usual, and seeing as how the map is designed with Beldr on the complete opposite side of the map from your team, and having a plethora of demons to block your way, it's understandable to see why people claim that this is where the true challenge of the Beldr fight is. And the point of this challenge is also an important thing to address. Besides challenge being something that a lot of people look for in their games, challenge can also be used to keep players engaged and not find themselves getting bored, or even get across an idea to the player, which is what Beldr does. The counter with Beldr is as tough as it is because it's meant to teach you a necessary skill. A common element in a good chunk of Mega 10 games are teaching players how their games work through indirect means. Nocturne really doesn't tell you how press turn works, but it's so integrated into the gameplay that you're going to pick up on it at any time. It's not exactly an easy thing to get right, but Mega 10 manages to do it pretty efficiently, where their most well-known means of doing this is with their staple early game bosses. Once again, going back to Nocturne, El Matador beats into you that you're going to need to use buffs and debuffs in this game by showing you how effective they are to use. It's a challenge, yet an effective means of teaching the player important skills they'll need to use throughout the game. Beldr can definitely be categorized as one of these boss fights. Devil Survivor is also about moving around maps efficiently and not just the combat. With the way the map is designed and how simple it is to take care of Beldr, I think it's fair to claim that it was the intent of the developers to make the challenge getting to Beldr himself. And through that, you can use navigation as another skill to take care of enemies in Devil Survivor, although you could argue that the story builds him up as a stronger threat in terms of the battle itself. After all of this, I'm definitely willing to say that the Beldr fight is definitely not as poorly designed as I originally thought it was. Sure, some parts of the encounter I hate even more than I did originally, but overall, I think much more highly of it. But I've still got some things I want to say about Beldr before putting an end to this video. I've discussed how the Beldr fight is designed in a way for the player to make them use navigation more in their strategies from here on out, and I think that's neat. But it was only when I really began to script this part of the video that I realized that I didn't take that away from the fight. This is definitely the part of the video where it gets even more opinionated, so just a heads up. To clarify how my first time with Beldr went, I went with a very trial and error approach, trying again and again to get good RNG to luck my way through. Basically brute forcing my way through. The equivalent of grinding to level 30 just to beat Matador, and honestly I have no way of blaming this on Beldr. I nearly had a similar experience against Michiguchi in Raido 1, but after taking a break and coming back later, I creamed the fight easy. Sometimes it's just better to chill out and come back later, help, maybe even ask around for some help, and I wish I took that approach with Beldr. I could probably make a case for Beldr being way too hard, or not exactly doing the best job of teaching me, but with such an indirect design, something like this is just bound to happen. There's no way to stop it from happening. Basically, just take a break if you're struggling, ask around for some help, and come back later. And eventually just try again and hopefully win. Beldr still perplexes me like nothing else, but at least I've gotten a little more concrete on my thoughts regarding him. Some of the stuff like Devil's Fuge and its ambiguity still bother the hell out of me and could have been way the hell better communicated, but a majority of the encounter is carefully designed to teach the player an important skill in an indirect method. Unfortunately, I didn't take note of that at first, and for a long time struggled with him. Games can't always account for that kind of stuff, and that's just inherent with the hands-off approach. Not everyone's gonna get it, sadly. But even if I didn't personally like Beldr my first time through, and I still don't to an extent, I can clarify that the design of the fight is still rather well done and thought out. People tend to struggle with at least one of these many wake-up call fights in the series, and I guess mine was just Beldr. He's not perfect, of course, but he's good enough. Just like the Mythos, kinda? That's a dumb analogy, but you probably get what I mean.